Hello and welcome back again to That Tracks F1 podcast. It's great to have you here for this, our roundup of the F1 news, rumours and updates. It's not long now till the Canadian Grand Prix and there's been plenty going on in the F1 world. There's been rumours, there's been a little bit of an early start to the driver silly season, there has been FIA meetings, there's been lots of things going on. But before we get into discussing all that, could I please ask if you give us a like and press that subscribe button, give the podcast a review, that would be really, really great. And if you want to give us a follow on social media, the links to our socials are in the show notes. I'd really, really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Well, first thing of note, I think, is that there's been another meeting between the FIA, power unit manufacturers, and team bosses, and this was to discuss further refinements to the current regulations. So from 2027, this more or less 50-50 split that we have at the minute between the internal combustion engine and the battery is going to go to more of a 60-40 split. Remember, it was 70-30 last year, more or less. And a lot of people thought that 50-50 was too big of a leap and that we should have gone 60-40. And that's what they're talking about now, that the internal combustion engine power will be increased by 50 kilowatts and essentially the battery power reduced by 50 kilowatts, giving that balance of 60-40. So all that's left to do now is that the power unit manufacturers have to vote on whether they agree with this or not. And I think it'll be interesting to see how Audi will react to it, because Audi was brought into F1 on the understanding that the engines would be 50-50, because this is what Audi wanted, because it gives road relevance to their road cars. This was the kind of the premise that they came into F1 from. So it will be interesting to see how they feel about going back to this split. I'm wondering if Audi will go along with it reasonably happily. Obviously, it was a big push on their part, 50-50, because of this road relevance to the cars they were selling. But really, the car industry now isn't pushing for these fully electric vehicles in the way that they once were. So hopefully, Audi will be in agreement to these tweaks to the regulations. The other bit of news, talking of future regulation sets, I'm sure you've all heard that Mohammed bin Sulayem has promised a return of the V8. Now, I am low-key excited about that. I would like to be fully high-key excited about that. I didn't quite, because bin Sulayem has been a little bit inclined to make statements before that were perhaps a little ambitious. I personally think that this is a great idea. I am all for it. But I also appreciate that I'm quite old school. You know, I got into F1 at a time when, if you happened to be trackside when they came past you, even for a couple of laps at testing, you'd go home with your ears ringing because they sounded amazing. Now, according to MBS, he would like to bring this in by 2030 if he can persuade all of the teams to get on board with this idea. If not, he says it's coming in 2031, come what may. That'll be the FIA's decision at that point. If he tries to bring it in a year earlier, in 2030, he needs 4 out of the 6 power unit manufacturers to agree. So you've got Mercedes, you've got General Motors, Ferrari, Red Bull, Honda and Audi. So he would need 4 out of those 6 to agree to it. So I don't know, I guess we'll see. But I would like to get excited about it. Like I say, I'm just a little bit skeptical that even 2030 is still quite a long way off. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see how that one works out. It's become quite evident this week that driver silly season has started early this year, and there is lots of rumour and lots of speculation about who's going where, who might be leaving, who might be retiring, who's going on sabbatical. Maybe there's driver swaps. One of the driver swaps I've seen suggested, this kind of started as a rumour that Oscar might be leaving McLaren, that Red Bull want Oscar. I'm not quite sure what I think about that. I'm not sure that it would necessarily be a move in the right direction when it comes to having a chance at the championship. Red Bull have been on a little bit of a downward trajectory for a while, although recently I think we're seeing a bit of an upturn. I think really it's in some ways it's Max Verstappen, Fernando Alonso, and to a lesser degree probably Lewis Hamilton that are holding the key to the driver market at the minute. If all 3 of those stay put, I don't see an awful lot changing, in all honesty. But if Max does decide that he's had enough, or he does decide to take a bit of a sabbatical, then that really could open that market up. Personally, I don't think Max is going anywhere. I think that in Miami, I mean, he qualified second. I think he's made it very, very clear. I mean, a bit too clear for my taste. I've touched on this before that, yes, that we know he was right, that he predicted this. He knew that this was going to happen. And then he was a little bit like a dog with a bone and could definitely be accused of not seeing anything very positive in the new regulations. But I don't think anybody was really arguing with his point. I think that we were all in agreement. There was nothing wrong with what he was saying in principle. It was just that there was a lot of it being said. He was saying it repeatedly and threatening to leave. But, I mean, he's got to see this year out anyway, really, hasn't he? So I think with us going back to, or going over to 60-40 next year, and those improvements and the fact that Red Bull looked to be on a slightly upward trajectory at the moment, I really don't see Max going anywhere. If he did, I think it'd be a sabbatical. I don't think he would leave. And I think if this thing with the V8s happens, I think he would definitely be interested in coming back if he did leave for a short while. But in all honesty, I don't see him leaving. But it's certainly interesting to speculate, isn't it? I mean, I was fully on board last year with the concept that Max was going to Mercedes. It was in our family F1 predictions game, it was my season wildcard that Max was going to leave Red Bull and go to Mercedes. And like I said before, for my money, he got really close to that. It looked like it could be something that was on the cards, and then now he stayed put at Red Bull, and I'm still quite sore about that because he cost me 15 points, but I'll take it up with Max one day. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of rumour going around about the driver market at the moment. I do think it'd be interesting to see Piastri in a Red Bull. I think it would be interesting at this juncture to see Piastri in another team. I don't know, I feel like he's still got a few little rough edges to smooth out, and I think that another year at McLaren would probably do that. I think there's like I've said before, although they're very different, he and Lando are quite even in a lot of ways, and I think those little mini flaws that Oscar has with his driving, we know how hard he works to correct things like that. I think another year at McLaren would probably be a move, but it's difficult, isn't it? It's knowing if and when to jump ship. I don't see Lando going. And I think he's made some comments recently about how McLaren is home. I don't see Lando really going anywhere. I think he would find settling into another team to be extremely difficult because McLaren is really all he's known, and he speaks of them like they're his family. But it's different for Oscar. Oscar's in that very difficult position of, is he going to follow Lando down that path where he kind of stays put until, heaven forbid, he gets the push, or is he going to jump ship and go to another team? And if so, which team? And if so, when? Stay too long at McLaren, it could make it difficult to enmesh yourself in a new team. If you jump too soon, you could end up picking the wrong team and kicking yourself wishing you'd stayed at McLaren. It's really not an easy choice for Oscar, but if and when he does move team, I'll be really interested to see how that plays out. Just going back to Max for a moment, with his current contract with Red Bull, he is contracted to stay at Red Bull until the end of 2028. But it's my understanding that there are certain clauses to that. If the performance from the team is not there, if they're not giving Max the car that he wants, and I believe, although it's not confirmed, that there are some leave clauses built into his contract, and that if the Red Bull is not competitive by the summer break, he's within his rights to leave. I'm not sure what constitutes not competitive. I don't know where that line in the sand is drawn. I think if they were consistently at the back of the grid, that would be clearly not competitive. If they were consistently on the podium, that would be competitive. At the minute, we don't know. They've been middle pack really up to Miami, and the latest upgrades seem to push them up the order quite a bit, at least from what we can see with Max. We don't really know how well Isaac will do with the upgrades because he had such a shocking weekend last race. But yeah, I suppose if Max is looking for a way out, then he could cite those clauses as his right to leave. Fernando Alonso is another driver who's holding a key to the driver market at the moment as well. He's been a little bit more forthcoming about his thought processes around leaving, about retiring. He's said that obviously things have changed since the birth of his son earlier this year, but that he's not making any decisions until after the summer break, and that's the point where he'll sit down with Aston Martin and talk through his options. So that to me says that retirement at the end of this season is very much on the table for Fernando. And I think it'll depend on a number of factors as to whether he carries on. And if he does make that decision to go, that will open up a seat there, and that will see some movement in the driver market as well. The other main contender, I suppose, according to the chat in the paddock, is will Lewis stay on at Ferrari? I think it was a reasonably positive start to the season for Lewis. I think he felt quite annoyed at Miami, and understandably so. He sustained that damage early in the main race and did extremely well to bring the car home where he did, really. But he's looking a little bit behind to Charles Leclerc at the moment. But he definitely came back into this year with a far more positive mindset. So I'm really hoping that as upgrades and updates come in, that we'll see Lewis up there giving Charles a run for his money, getting some podiums, getting some good points. And I think if that happens this year, I think if he has a positive rest of the year, I don't think he will be looking to announce a retirement this year. There are some low-key rumours going around that I know rumours and gossip are a similar thing, but it seems to be just gossip to me that Lewis could potentially announce his retirement at the British Grand Prix. I honestly would be extremely surprised if that happens, because I think he would regret it, because I don't think that he's given it, in his own mind, he would have given it enough of a chance. Last year's car was a dog, so we can't judge anything by that. This year's car is definitely a big improvement. I was very, very worried about the upgrades they bring to Miami, and thankfully they didn't do a Ferrari. They didn't take a decent car, scrap it and build a bad one. So I think really Lewis has got to see how the rest of his season will go yet. But I would be very surprised if he leaves at the end of this year. And I think there would be a part of him that regrets it, particularly if, when we go over to the 60-40 next year, if that Ferrari makes another leap forward, I think he would regret not having stuck it out for another year. So I could be wrong, but I don't see him retiring. On the subject of Piastri leaving McLaren, that obviously would leave a seat open there. And there's been some rumour and speculation around who could potentially take that. There has been some chat about Carlos Sainz actually going over to McLaren. On one level, I personally would love to see Carlos go to McLaren. We all know, don't we? Carlos and Lando have a bromance going on. They're really, really good friends. They gel really, really well together. And Carlos is not only a good driver behind the wheel, he's also an extremely intelligent driver trackside as well. He can see and understand an awful lot about strategy. So I think he would be an absolute asset there at McLaren. And I think the dynamic between he and Lando would be absolutely fantastic. However, again, I don't see him leaving Williams. I know this year's not been great. The odd thing is last year was supposed to look a little bit like this year is looking so far. Last year was pretty decent. This year was supposed to be the year, and it really isn't. They have really, really struggled with this regulation set. They are another team that I think will be helped out massively by going to the 60-40 split. And I just think that if things don't improve within the next few races, that really they will look to be developing next year's car as much as they can, maybe somewhat right off this year. And I just think Carlos deliberated for such a long time about where he was going to go once he lost his seat at Ferrari to Lewis. And I think he weighed up everything very, very carefully, and he chose Williams. And I think that he will honour that, and he will stick with that. And I think it will pay off. And yes, I know, again, going to say that, Williams girly and all that, but I do think it will pay off. I think next year we will see a very different Williams. Looking further down the grid, if we look at Alpine, I would say that next year that Pierre Gasly will stay put with Alpine. I think he'd be very, very wise to stay put with Alpine. Yes, I know the team is looking for a buyer and it may no longer be Alpine in name, but Pierre is having a cracking season. I mean, he had a good season last year, considering that the car was worst on the grid. He did absolutely everything he could to drag it into the points and into positions. And this year, he really has had a great start to the season again. Colapinto's seat is another question. I mean, I absolutely adore Franco, and I think he's phenomenally talented. I don't think we've really seen the best of him yet. And I think last weekend was very, very encouraging. And I was really, really pleased to see that he did so well. I mean, he out-qualified Gasly, which is no mean feat. So well done to Franco, but we are going to need to keep seeing that. We need to see that progress, I think, in order for him to keep his seat. And if that doesn't happen, if he goes backwards again or he struggles, then it could be I know he brings some good money into that team, but it could be that Alpine let him go at the end of this year, which would open up a seat there. And with the progress Alpine have made, that would be a sought-after, decent top midfield team. So that would be, I think, a place that a number of drivers would look at to go. Also, it's a similar situation at Haas for Esteban Ocon. I really rate Ocon. I know that he gets an awful lot of flack and an awful lot of criticism, and some of it I do understand. But I actually really, really like him. And I think on his day, he's really, really good. He's really, really fast. And I think we've really seen a lot of growth from Esteban over the years. So if he does go, I would be quite sad to see Esteban go. I think he's very likeable. And I know that's not a very popular opinion. For some reason, he does seem to attract quite a bit of negativity or even sometimes a little bit of disinterest, which is a real shame because, yes, he's one of the quieter drivers. He doesn't flash his personality about that much, but I like him. I'd be really sad to see him go. But it has to be said that this year has not got off to a very auspicious start and that he really is going to have to raise his game and start getting some results because at the moment, Ollie Behrman, bearing in mind that he's not been in the sport long, is really showing Esteban up. So I think it could be that if Esteban doesn't get to grips with these new regulations and get to grips with this car and start bringing those results, that he could find himself out of Haas next year. And realistically, if the, in my opinion, unlikely happens and Lewis does retire, that would probably leave that seat open for Ollie Behrman. That would be a heck of a move for him. And it's the obvious move. It wouldn't be a big stretch for Ollie Behrman to go to Ferrari. And I think he'd do extremely well there. But if that did happen, that would leave both seats open at Haas. But we do have lots of younger drivers coming up through the ranks that are ready to take these seats. And let's not forget as well, we've still got people like Yuki Tsunoda who are looking for a way back into the sport. I mean, Yuki is experienced, he's talented, he's intelligent, and he's still a test driver. He's still a reserve driver. So there's absolutely no reason why he couldn't put himself forward to take one of these seats as well. But when it comes to the younger drivers, should the spaces come up, there are a few definite options out there. Haas has got Jack Doohan as a reserve. Now, I know that Jack's brief foray into F1 last year was not the most auspicious, but I very much feel, as do a number of people, that he really wasn't given a fair chance. I think he was taken out of that Alpine far too soon before he'd really had a chance to show what he was capable of. So there could always be a way back in for Jack. You've also got Ryo Hirakawa, who is the reserve driver for Haas. And while I say younger drivers, Rio is a little bit different in that he is 32, so he's not as young as some of the younger drivers, but he's had a really successful career in lots of different series. He's got plenty of racing experience, and that maturity often pays dividends, so he could be a very interesting choice for Haas. Haas have also been known to dip into the Ferrari driver pool, and there's lots of options there as well. You've got Rafael Camara. He's the Brazilian-Portuguese driver who won the F3 last year. And so far in F2 this year, out of the two races that have been run, he's had one pole, the fastest lap and a podium, which is not too shabby. You've also got Dino Beganovic, who is Swedish-Bosnian, and he was 7th in last year's F2 with one win and 5 podiums. So again, definitely no slouch. So Haas have got plenty of people to choose from should they decide that they're not going to keep Ocon, or in the unlikely event that Ollie moves across to Ferrari. I think probably the most likely scenario from where I can see it is that Ollie is going to stay put because, as I say, I don't believe that Lewis will retire. So I think that Haas will keep Ollie. He will gain even further experience this year, and I think he will become quite a good team leader if they do decide to promote up one of the younger drivers. Who that will be, I wouldn't really like to say. I actually think that Rafael Camara is something quite special. So if it was me, that's who I would probably promote. But this is the world of fantasy F1 here. I don't have all of the information. So it'd be quite a young team with Camara and Behrman, but I think that would be quite good. I think that would be something quite special for Haas. But who knows? And Racing Bulls as well, that's somewhere where we could see a little bit of movement. I pretty much think that Lindblad will be staying put. He's finding his way at the minute. He's finding his feet. I think this year, especially with these new regs, will be a learning curve for him. He's racing at tracks he's never raced at before. He's getting to grips with lots of new things, and I think he's taking it pretty well in his stride. So I really don't see Lindblad going anywhere. Not quite so sure about Liam Lawson. Liam's a bit of an odd one for me. When he first came into the sport, when he first came into Formula One, he came with a lot of confidence, a lot of confidence. And I wasn't sure that I warmed to him straight away, but I do think after what happened to him when he got chewed up by the Red Bull machine, and officially it was a demotion back to Racing Bulls, but I'm not actually sure it was a demotion at this point. And I quite enjoy watching Liam race, and I have nothing against him as a person, and I've really warmed to him quite a lot. I think he's quite an aggressive driver, but I don't mind that too much. But he really is either on it or off it. There's no in between with Liam. He's either having a really good weekend or he's having a really poor one. And I really don't know how much more he can develop. I think what would actually do Liam the absolute power of good would be to move teams. I kind of feel like Liam needs a little bit of like slightly taking under somebody's wing, which had it worked out at Red Bull, he could have learned such a lot from Max. But I don't know. I'm really never quite sure how to feel about Liam. Absolutely nothing against him as a person. I think he has learned a lot. I'm just not confident that I'm not 100% confident he'll keep his seat next year. I think that Liam's seat could be under threat, and obviously Yuki is the reserve for both Red Bull and Racing Bull. I think it could go either way. So I think Liam really has got to really have a really good rest of this season to prove his worth and to keep his seat. And of course, it's not just Yuki Tsunoda that Liam's got to worry about poaching his seat. Racing Bulls also have Ayuma Iwasa as a reserve driver, and he's another very, very accomplished driver. He's been a test driver for quite a while. Last year won the Super Formula. He certainly has bags and bags of experience and will be looking for a way into F1. Audi are actually quite interesting because, as far as I know, they've still not actually announced their reserve drivers. I think currently they have Freddie Slater and Emma Felbermeyer from F1 Academy in their young driver program. But I don't think as of yet they've officially been announced as reserve drivers. So we'll have to keep an eye out for that. Cadillac, I think next year it'll probably stay much as it is. Perez and Bottas. They do have Zhou Guanyu as a reserve at Cadillac. So they do have some options. I think the close eye is being kept by quite a few people on who's coming out on top of the Perez and Bottas inter-team competition. In our family, most of us felt that Bottas would come out on top, apart from one family member who felt very strongly that it would be Perez. As you can probably imagine, he's feeling quite smug at the moment, but it's a long season. That's all I'm going to say. We'll have to see. When it comes to Mercedes, I don't really see anything changing next year. Yes, they've got Frederic Vesti as a reserve driver, but I can't imagine that either Mercedes driver will go anywhere next year. Absolutely, can pretty much guarantee. I'm 99.999% certain that Kimi Antonelli is going absolutely nowhere. George, I'm not as sure, but I still think it's very unlikely he'll be leaving. I can see him being at Mercedes for at least another year. And at Alpine, as I touched on before, pretty much think that Pierre will still be there next year. Can't see Pierre going anywhere. Little bit of a question mark over Franco Colapinto at the minute. Alpine have got two very capable reserves in Paul Aron and Kush Maini, so who knows? But it isn't an automatic for any of these teams that they will take one of the reserves and promote them. It could be a current driver. It could be a reserve driver. Who knows? It could be that everything stays pretty much the way it is. We're just going to have to wait and see. But silly season has definitely started early this year. Lots and lots of speculation. And really, I think until Max says what his plans are for 2026, nobody else is really going to say much or make much of a move. So that's a little roundup of the major news stories in the F1 world at the moment. There'll probably be more to come. We've got a week yet until Canada kicks off. There's lots to look forward to at Canada. It's another sprint weekend. We've also got the Mercedes updates coming. So that's going to be very interesting to see. Will Kimi make it 4 on the bounce? Or will George bite back? Or could it be another McLaren weekend? A Ferrari weekend? I'll be back next week to discuss all of that in my preview of the Canadian Grand Prix. I'd love for you to join me. That'll be coming your way on Thursday of next week. But until then, enjoy your weekend, have lots of fun, and don't forget the cheesy tagline. That tracks F1 podcast. Track the action. Join the fun. Bye.